Hello, good evening, and it's the Father's Day edition of News at 10. I'm Stephen Enti. We're live from our studios here at Adesawe Kanda in Accra, and you can also watch TV3 on your DSTV channel 279. Let's start with the major news highlights for the day. Marking the Father's Day here on TV3, we looked at how 63-year-old Stephen Ayinsu Archer is single-handedly managing his home after the wife's death 5 years ago. He tries to cook and fend for his 4 children in his own small way. Though he misses his wife, he plans to enjoy every moment with his children. And the National Identification Authority has denied any involvement of or connection with purported Ghana cards of some minority MPs circulated on social media, describing them as fake. In a statement issued by the Corporate Affairs Directorate, the NIA indicated it has no evidence of having registered any minority MP, and for that matter has not issued a Ghana card for any minority MP, asking the public to disregard them. And the director of the Judicial Training Institute, Justice Dennis Adjei, has urged the Food and Drugs Authority to push for a review of the Public Health Act if it feels the current law is not punitive enough. Justice Dennis Adjei, who is also a Court of Appeal judge, was responding to concerns raised by the FDA over the slow nature of trial of FDA offences as well as judgments not deterrent enough. On the international front, 2 suicide bombers have attacked a town in northeastern Nigeria only hours after the country's army chief urged displaced residents to return home because it was safe. The blast hit the town of Damboa in the Borno state on Saturday evening, and residents say at least 31 people have died. The explosions were followed up by rockets fired from outside the town. Those are our major news highlights. Remember, we're streaming live on our Facebook page and on 3news.com. Up next is the big one. Welcome back. Now, pressure group Occupy Ghana says it is unacceptable and inhumane for medical staff to turn patients away because they do not have beds to admit them. In a statement, Occupy Ghana said it is convinced that the no bed excuse is a cowardly opt-out, hiding a much deeper problem as affecting Ghana's health system. The release further noted, refusing to admit a patient requiring urgent attention violates the dignity and respect for life enshrined in the Constitution of the Fourth Republic. The statement follows the death of a 70-year-old man last week after he was allegedly turned away by some 7 major health facilities in Accra. The group has outlined 11 points it believes, when implemented, could impact positively on the country's emergency response system. Right, so let's get on to Skype right now and speak with Nana Sapong Ajiman Bedu, who is a member of Occupy Ghana. Good evening, Nana, and thank you. We're grateful for your time. So, about these pointers you mentioned, it's unfortunate that I cannot go through the tall list of 11 points you have raised, but I'll summarize some of them. You say that an emergency response service with a command center that fields calls and receives data from hospitals about beds, counts, etc., that will enable ambulances to be sent and paramedics to assist and stabilize the patient way in advance. This is one of them, and you says all hospitals should be able to care for emergency cases. So the point you're making is that out of all these 11 you've raised, you feel that none of them are in practice in our hospitals when it comes to emergency responses?
Yeah. Thank you, and good evening to your viewers. Yeah, most of them are not being done. I mean, for instance, if you take the first the first line that deals with the emergency response service. At the moment, you have police having its own number, fire service having its own, ambulance having its own, and even sometimes when you watch certain shows on television and listen to the radio, when interviews are being conducted with the police, then they start mentioning numbers beginning 0302 and a whole lot of numbers. And in the case of emergency, how is someone supposed to remember all these numbers if we just had one number that when you call, it just goes to one command center, and then from there, if you need an ambulance, a fire service, or a police, it links you straight up to that particular, unit. So we just need one command center which will deal with all these things. And also, at the moment, sometimes when you go to the hospital, they turn you away because they look at you and think that you can't pay for the service. But in financing emergency cases, the National Health Insurance is supposed to take care of such costs. So the issue of somebody not having money should not be a problem once you have an emergency and get to the hospital. And one other thing too is that sometimes it's not every kind of emergency to us that is real emergency. So if there is some education on what the public should look out for as emergency cases, that should help so that they can actually.
But Nana Sapon, the public would not be able to tell. For example, if I'm ill and I'm having breathing difficulty, I'm not asthmatic, I could assume it's asthma and it might not be an emergency, whilst in actual sense it could be the beginning of a heart attack.
Yeah, but I mean, how many of us actually do know CPR? How many of us are taught basic first aid at home, how to do resuscitation when somebody sort of has a problem? You know, some of these things should be inculcated into our basic school education, going all the way to the tertiary schools, and even in the offices. I mean, many of us do not know all these basic things, and this is something that the Ghana Health Service should, together with the Ghana Education Service, be, teaching a lot of people on. And also, I mean, some hospitals should be designated as emergency hospitals, which are well equipped to give, triage care when emergencies do come in. At the moment, we do not have many of these things. And with the issue of no beds, some of them are very genuine, that there are no beds. And because the hospitals are overstretched, people go there and they don't have beds. And we do have a lot of hospitals under construction, which are yet to be opened by government. And we will call on government to expedite action to get these hospitals running.
And I'm sure you also recognize that at the heart of all of these is the fact that we need money. There need to be funding from the state and other relevant institutions in order to make these things you're suggesting happen. Does it look to you that government is committed to providing the funding that will make these possible?
We recognize that there are economic challenges. We do need the money, but they shouldn't be an excuse, because if government can afford to buy new 4x4 vehicles for government officials, then being able to afford emergency services and vehicles like ambulances should not be a huge problem. I mean, recently we heard Parliament, pass a loan for parliamentarians to be acquiring vehicles and all that. I mean, if you can get loans to purchase ambulances, because a country of about 29 million and we have only 54 working ambulances is highly unacceptable. We cannot accept such a thing. So if we're able to afford to buy new vehicles for the public sector, then there should be it's a matter of priority.
Right.
And in the constitution, the government is supposed to ensure good quality health for all citizens. So it shouldn't be an excuse despite the economic challenges.
Nana Sapon Bedu, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much. Nana Sapon Bedu is with Occupy Ghana. I'm Stephen Enti, and this is News at 10. We're broadcasting live from the News Hub. We have more news for you. Please stay. Right, lawyers for the fiscally challenged woman who was denied a seat on an Africa World Airline flight has sued the airline for discrimination and breach of contract. According to Rita Kriba's lawyers, a demand notice for 200,000 cedis compensation for discrimination on the basis of her disability and an additional 10,000 cedis for failing to fly her despite having a ticket did not receive a favorable response. They also want an apology published in the Daily Graphic newspaper. In their suit, they're seeking from the court, among other things, a declaration that their client was discriminated against based on her physical disability and a declaration that Rita Kriba's human rights have been violated. And a lawyer for Rita Kriba has been explaining reasons for seeking redress from the court's lawyer. Harold Tuguba spoke on Midday Live.
When we wrote to Africa World Airlines on behalf of our client Rita Kriba, demanding the publication of an unqualified apology to her and to all persons living with disability for discriminatory treatment, and also for a sum of 200,000 Ghana cedis for discrimination, and finally, a sum of 10,000 cedis for having breached the contract between our client and Africa World Airlines to transit Rita Kriba from Accra to Kumasi. All they did was to write a letter to us, actually justifying the discriminatory conduct and offering a personal apology. And so that necessitated us filing an application in court. And indeed, the application was filed on the 11th of June, 2018. So as I speak with you, the case is before court.
Right, we have in the studio tonight Henry Osabote. He has been advocating for Rita Kriba since the matter broke in the Supreme Court, in the media, I beg your pardon. He's the CEO of the Henry Osabote Education Foundation. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much, extremely, for coming. So now tell me why you took up the matter for Rita Kriba.
Yeah, I took up the matter because over the years, people living with disability have been relegated to the background. They've been discriminated against several times, and service providers have also not hinged themselves to the constitutions, the act of people living with disability in the constitution.
Mm-hmm. And so you are suggesting that discrimination against persons with disabilities is deeply rooted in our society. I mean, I cannot argue with that, but there are also concerns that perhaps a lot more has been achieved since the Disability Act was passed. You don't think so?
No. The Act makes it clear that service providers must make sure their facilities are friendly to everybody. But currently, it is not as we see. If you go around several schools in the country, hospitals, banks, the story is different. You can't walk in free as a disabled person to access their facility. And I have been there several times with Rita, and then we face this challenge every day. This is the reason why most people living with disability cannot contribute to the development of the country, because
they cannot reach their maximum potential because they're discriminated against. But the case of Rita Kriba, I recall that the airline apologized to her, perhaps not as directly as you might wish, like in the form of publication in a newspaper and stuff like that. Is it not enough for Rita to let go?
It's not enough, because the apology came after several media battles, and then it wasn't from it was a defense apology. It wasn't like they're running a service that they have to provide an alternative for it to get to.
So it wasn't remorseful.
It
wasn't apologetic enough.
Yes. So we think that that is why the lawyers went ahead to write a demand letter, so that this should be a wake-up call for all service providers to understand that we can't take people for granted. The fact that they're disabled doesn't mean that they don't have ability to produce or to live a better life like any other person.
I know that this won't be necessarily about Rita alone, that perhaps your advocacy is aiming at attracting a lot more attention for the broader interest when it comes to physically challenged people. What are you seeking to achieve, really? I mean,
really, our fight is for the generation and other people who have been relegated. There's a federation for disabled, but they have not been able to reach their maximum because they're always challenged. Wherever they have to pursue their case, they are not able to reach there because the director or whoever have to.
Is it like financially?
Yes, financially, and then physically as well. If you have to go to the DC or whoever who's supposed to help you, and then you have to climb 3 stairs or 4 stairs for 4-story buildings, there's no way you go for the first time and go again. So this challenge this fight is to let the future generation people know that the Act provides the right for them to enjoy every other facilities like any other person. So it's, with Takriba's case, it's a wake-up call for all Ghanaians to understand that disability is not inability, and people with disability are very strong people. They are very intelligent like all of us. But things that would take you a minute to do, it would take them 10 minutes because they have been challenged in a certain way. So the law provides so many ways for them to be convenient like any other person. But that is what people have been abusing, and that is what we are standing up for.
So what's your strategy?
I
mean, because if I say strategy, the group which is going to court, you are part of.
Yes.
Those going to court. So you're going to court. Beyond court, then what?
Yeah, beyond court, we want people to understand, service providers especially, to provide means, facilities that will favor everybody, or especially the people with disability, so that in future we will have people giving good preference to people with disability.
And how is Rita taking all of this?
Yeah, Rita's supposed to be here with
from
me.
the loud media noise that came out from her situation. How has she been coping?
Yeah, Rita is a strong person. She was supposed to be here with me, but this very incident has brought her down psychologically. So we're just working on her slowly because she is not an ordinary person. She's a graduate working with the government. And then she thinks that she has been sorted enough because at the incidents, when people are around and you can't fly with them because you have crutches, which is not of her doing, and she wasn't born with it. And if you look at the rate at which accidents are happening in Ghana, Africa especially, anybody can become disabled at any time. So Rita is strong, but then she's not taking it lightly at this moment. That is why she's not here with me. So I have to stand in for her.
Anyway, we're grateful for your time. We wish you the very best in your advocacy with Rita. I'm Stephen Enti. This is News at 10. Let's move on to some other stories now. The director of the Judicial Training Institute, Justice Dennis Ajayi, has urged the Food and Drugs Authority to push for a review of the Public Health Act if it feels the current law is not punitive enough. Justice Dennis Ajayi, who is also a Court of Appeal judge, was responding to concerns raised by the FDA over the slow nature of trial of FDA offences as well as judgment not deterrent enough.
The workshop was to engage the judiciary on how to resolve challenges on regulation of food, herbal medicinal products, cosmetics and household chemicals. Board chairman of the FDA, Dr. Samuel Ohene, is of the view that criminalizing FDA offenses would address the many challenges that confront the authority in its fight against illegal drug peddling. He called for the speedy trial of illegal drug peddlers.
We are of the firm belief that speedy trials, coupled with imposition of penalties as prescribed by the law, would act as a deterrent to these unscrupulous persons and serve notice to persons that would desire to endanger the lives of Ghanaians and other consumers in this country.
Director of the Judicial Training Institute, Justice Dennis Ajayi, maintained judges would only pronounce judgments that are within the ambit of the law.
The law prescribes minimum sentence and maximum sentence. So a judge has a right to operate within the minimum and the maximum. If you look at the law, it seems the FDA is in favor of custodial sentence, but the judges are not under any obligation to impose custodial sentence at any point in time, because the law permits the judges either to impose a fine or custodial sentence. If a fine is imposed and the person cannot pay, then in default of payment of the fine, then the person will serve the sentence.
He urged the FDA to consider a review of the Public Health Act, Act 851 of 2012.
If they think that custodial sentence should be the appropriate sentence, then there is the need to have a second look at the law, because the law provides for payment of fine or term of imprisonment. So once that option is there, a judge may do one or two or both.
The workshop will be replicated in other regions.
And that's how we wrap up with News at 10. Thank you very much for staying with us. Russia Daily is up next. I'm Stephen Anti. On behalf of the crew here, good night. There is more news at 3news.com.